Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at our warm-up for today. Warm-up is entitled Details. Here are the three questions. What is the main idea of the following pictures? Give a description of one thing that is seen in the picture that supports your thought of the main idea, and then give one conclusion that can be drawn from the pictures even though it is not seen in the picture. So take 30 seconds out to look at each of the pictures on the screen. These pictures are also in your PowerPoint notes. And then I want you to be able to answer the following questions. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds from now to be able to examine the pictures and then be able to provide answers to the following questions on details. Ten more seconds. All right, so after taking a look at the pictures, let's look at the first question. What do you think is the main idea of the following pictures? First of all, what do we see in each one of these pictures? Axel, yes?
That everyone is bored of learning.
Okay, bored of learning. What else can we actually examine from the pictures? What else do we see? Fabrizio, yes? Okay, everybody looks tired, everybody's bored of learning. So based off of each picture, what do we believe is the main idea of these pictures? Jeff, yes?
Boredom.
Boredom, okay? But boredom where specifically?
In school.
In school. So we can say the main idea of these pictures as depicted in each one is that there is some sense of boredom. In the first picture, you have a young man who's looking at a book and he looks like he's bored of reading. The second one, you have a student who's surrounded by books and looks like he's just tired of just even looking at the books or having to read the books for school. And then the third picture, you have, it looks like an older student, probably a high school student, who is actually asleep while his other classmates beside him look like they're either bored or maybe halfway interested in whatever the lesson is. So the next question becomes, give a description of one thing that is seen in the picture that supports your thought of the main idea. So you said that the main idea is boredom. What is one thing in the picture that gives you evidence of that being the main idea? Axel?
That there's a teenager that's sleeping in class.
Okay, so, but what do you specifically see in the pictures?
Oh, that everyone else is like leaning and not listening.
Okay, so you actually see physical people leaning. You actually see a physical young man actually lying down. What is he lying down on?
A book.
A book. Okay, what else do we see?
Oh, their faces look uninterested.
Their faces look on it, so they're facial expressions. Okay, so you got the facial expressions, you got the young man lying down on the book, and then in the background, the third picture, we know that he's in what environment?
School.
He's in school, he's in the classroom more specifically. So all of those things give us evidence to show that this is boredom, and those evidences are given because they are exactly seen in the picture. You don't have to infer, you don't have to come to a conclusion, you can see those in the picture. Now, the last question says, give one conclusion that can be drawn from the pictures even though it's not seen. So let's see if we can now come up with a detail or a semblance of details that we can draw or assumptions that we can come up with based off of things that are not displayed in the picture. So what conclusion or assumption can we come up with that will help us to understand the pictures more even though it's not directly seen? What do you think?
That they're annoying the teacher.
Okay, that they're annoying the teacher. Now, that's not directly seen in the picture. Why? Because none of those pictures, there are no teachers. But what evidence can we use that they may be an annoyance to the teacher?
The girl over there kind of looks like she's covering up her ears.
Okay, the covering up of the ears. What other evidence can we use to show that there may be an annoyance to the teacher? Yes.
The kid is laying down on the book.
Okay, the actual laying down and sleeping on the book. What other evidence can we actually use? Fajay, yes.
Facial expressions.
Okay, the facial expressions. Now, in each one of those cases, those may not necessarily be depicted in the picture where the facial expressions are, but the actual the annoyance of the teacher is not depicted in any one of those pictures, but we can draw a conclusion that that may be a possibility of what's going on simply because of the fact that if a teacher is standing before a class and he or she is teaching and you see a student with a puzzled look on their face, if you see a student sleeping, if you see a student doing other things, then most likely that would be an annoyance. Now, so with that being said, what you have just done in a matter of just a couple of minutes is identify main idea, identify what we classify explicit details, and identify what we classify as implicit details. And we're going to take a look at those definitions shortly. Are there any questions on the warm-up? All right, let's take a look at the objective for today. Jeff, read for me the objective, please.
The students will be able to accurately define and identify the terms main idea, implicit details, and explicit details, and cite evidence of each within multiple passages.
Okay, so the goal for today's lesson is not only to learn the definition of main idea, explicit details, implicit details, but to be able to actually be given certain passages and be able to pull out the main idea and those types of details from passages or text. Okay, our standards for today are RI 8.1, 8.2. The first one says, cite the textual evidence that most strongly supports an analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as an inference drawn from the text. The second one says, determine the central idea of a text and analyze its development over the course of the text, including its relationships and supporting ideas, as well as provide an objective summary. And so we always talk about the fact that standards are just simply the skills by which they say that you have to learn by the time you leave your individual grade. The standards also are the means by which the teachers derive their objectives for the class. And as you can see, the objective of being able to identify main idea, implicit detail, explicit detail came directly from each one of these standards. All right, let's do a review of what we've talked about in our previous lesson before we move into today's information. Aileen, read for me what we've done in our previous lesson, please.
In the last lesson, we focused on language conventions. The language conventions that was focused upon was parts of speech, more specifically the definition of an adverb. Definition. An adverb is a word that describes a verb, adjective, or another adverb. An adverb normally ends in ly and can come anywhere when describing a verb and directly come in before an adjective and adverb when it describes it.
Thank you. So we said in the last lesson we talked about language conventions. We focused on parts of speech. As you know, we've been working hard on parts of speech, parts of speech, punctuation, grammar, mechanics, capitalization. All of those things we've actually been doing in class. So with our last lesson, we continued along with parts of speech on dealing with adverbs, and we learned what an adverb was, what an adverb ends in, and where adverbs normally come within the sentence. So moving on to today's lesson, let's take a look at the agenda of what we want to accomplish in today's lesson, and then we'll move into the new information. Edgar, read for me today's agenda of what we wanted to cover today in class.
Define main idea, define supporting details, define explicit and implicit details, identify the main idea, explicit details, and implicit details in the passages. Complete
Tiered assignments.
tiered assignments, summary, or exit ticket.
Okay, so very good. So define main ideas, supporting details, explicit and implicit details, give definitions for those, identify those in passages, complete tiered assignments, and then we'll do our summary and exit ticket. All right, so let's look at the first thing, main idea. Read for me, Jerusalem, the definition of main idea.
Definition. The main idea is the overall topic and we focus on text of paragraph.
Okay, so when we talk about main idea simply says what is the overall, the majority of the passage discussing. Now, main idea does not suggest that there won't be other topics that are being discussed in the passage, but it says overall what is the primary focus, because in most passages you're going to have focuses on different things, but the primary focus, that means the one that's talked about the most, is what we classify as the main idea. And that main idea, of course, can be found in a passage, a text or a story, or just one simple paragraph. Every passage, text, or paragraph has a central point that's focused on the most. Okay? Bullet point number 2. Fabricio, read that for me.
It is the most important thought about the topic. It is a big idea.
Okay, so we said the most important thought about the topic is the big idea. I classify it like the umbrella. Like if you ever see an umbrella is something that's supposed to cover your body and protect you from what?
Rain.
The rain. So I always look at it from this standpoint. Like in other previous classes, I used to have a picture of an umbrella, and then I used to have raindrops that were falling under the umbrella. The umbrella would be the overarching idea. That means this is the primary thing that we're going to discuss, whereas the raindrops would be all the little sub-points that would be related to that idea. So when we come to talk about main idea you can say is like the umbrella. It's that primary thing that covers the majority of the topic, whereas the raindrops are all of the things that support that primary topic. And we're going to talk about in a second that those raindrops can be kind of classified as supporting details, but we'll get to that in a second. All right, the next thing says to figure out the main idea, ask yourself this question. What is being said about the person, thing, or idea / topic or passage? And then it says the reader can normally locate the main idea in different places within the paragraph. So a lot of times they'll tell you the main idea is locked into the beginning of a paragraph or locked into the beginning of a passage. That is true sometimes, but that is not the only place by which you can find the main idea. A main idea can pretty much be found anywhere in the passage. They always say start off with the beginning first. However, if you don't find it in the beginning, then you can look at the end or the middle in order to find the main idea of a passage. Okay? All right, let's continue with main idea. Axel, read that next bullet point for me, please.
In order to have the main idea of a passage, text, or paragraph, one must have supporting details.
Okay, so supporting details. So what exactly are supporting details? Ulysses, read for me the definition of supporting details.
Supporting detail is details that provide evidence or give proof to what one who classifies an idea.
Okay, so supporting details are like the evidence that proves that something is the main idea. So for example, if I said to you, the sky is blue. Okay, so let's say the sky is blue is the main idea. The supporting details will be the evidences to prove that the sky is blue. So you may say, what are the evidences? You may be able to look up. You may be able to compare the color of the sky to a previous color of blue. If I said to you that the shoes are orange, again, the overarching idea, and then how can I prove the shoes are orange? Again, you can compare it to the actual color of orange. You may compare it to other things that are orange. So when we talk about supporting ideas or supporting details, we're just simply saying, what is the proof? What is the evidence that can prove it? Another example may be a court case. You may say, okay, this particular person caused the car accident. Okay, so if that is the main idea, what is the proof? Well, he failed to put on his blinker. He didn't look in his mirror before he got over. He, was speeding. All of those things are details that ultimately lead back to whatever the main idea or the overarching point is. Ajay, you had your hand up. Do you have a question or statement? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So it says within the supporting details, there are two types: explicit and implicit. Now, whenever I talk about explicit, the first thing that always comes to students' minds is what? When I say the term explicit, you automatically think about what? A song. Because on the beginning of a song, on a CD case, or when you're downloading it, it'll say explicit lyrics. What does it mean when it says explicit lyrics? Cursing, profanity, a lot of sexual, inappropriate things. So, but for purposes of English, the word explicit simply means something that is directly stated, something that you see, something that you don't have to guess, something that's not implied, whereas implicit is the opposite. It means that you have to kind of read in between the lines. It's not directly stated, it's not directly seen. You have to figure it out based off of the evidence. So here's our definition. It says explicit details are clearly stated so that there is no room for confusion or questions. So why would there not be any room for confusion or questions? Because the information is stated directly in the text. So in other words, when I'm reading a text, I'm reading a paragraph or a passage, the words are right there in black and white. I don't have to figure out what the author is trying to say because it's stated right there on the pages. Yes, Kelvin? Yes, you may. All right, implicit details. Jerusalem, read implicit details for me.
Implicit details requires a person to draw conclusions based on the factual evidence presented by the explicit details.
Okay, so implicit details require a person to draw conclusions based on the factual evidence presented by. So in other words, implicit details states that it's not in black and white. The author does not state it in the text. You have to figure out what the author may mean based off of the evidence that's there. For example, like we did with the warm-up, Axel was able to say that the teacher may be annoyed by the students. He was able to figure that out, not because the actual picture of a teacher was there, but based off of the evidence of the student laying on the book, the student with the poor facial expression was able to come to a determination or conclusion of what may be the case based off of presented evidence. Okay? And then we said explicit details are implied or suggested and not clearly stated. Okay? All right, so the last thing, read that for me, Jeff, again, which says in the end.
In the end, explicit details allow the reader to make.
Implicit.
Oh, implicit details allow the reader to make an inference, a conclusion made based on both information / evidence and reasoning.
Okay, so to infer. So let's say, for example, someone's walking down the hallway and you see an angry facial expression. Now, that person may not have told you specifically what's wrong, but based off of their facial expression, you can make an assumption that something is wrong. Okay? Now, how do we make the assumption? So what is the credible evidence that we know something is wrong? Their face is all shriveled up, they may be crying, they may have, their face may be, eyes may be red, nose may be crinkled up, whatever the case may be. But again, that is where you are making an inference, or you're able to draw details from what's going on simply because of the fact of what the evidence is that's presented. Okay? So with implicit details, it allows us to do the same exact thing. We can try to figure out kind of the meaning behind the meaning, so to speak, by the evidence that is given to us. All right, so let's look at this first one. I'm going to do this one as a model, and then we're going to do a second one together as a class. I have a passage here, and I've identified three things: the main idea, the explicit details, and on the next screen you're going to see the implicit details. So I'm going to read the passage out loud for you. It says, the immigrants left their homeland. Their new country was foreign to them. One of the ways in which the immigrants dealt with living in a foreign country was to build relationships with other immigrants who understood what they were feeling. These relationships helped them to feel not so alone in a strange place. So the first thing we said is, what is the main idea of this text? I stated that the main idea of this text is the transition of the immigrants from their homeland to a new one. Okay, so now the explicit details say, okay, what evidence can I pull from the text that's directly stated that tells me that this is possibly the main idea? Well, I used a couple of examples. Number one is the author specifically states they left their homeland. So that's the first thing that shows that there is a transition. So the fact that you are leaving to go from one place to another is a transition. Number two, it says they built relationships with other immigrants. So we know that the author directly states that after they left or made a transition and came to a new land, they then began to build relationships. So I don't have to figure that out. Why? Because the text directly tells me that they left their homeland, that they built relationships. So both of those things deal with the fact that they made a transition or a change, and then when they got to a new place, that new place entitled them or led them to build relationships. Now, with the implicit details, again, this is something that's not directly stated in the text. This is what I can figure out based off of the information that's given. And I said that based off of them leaving their homeland, coming to a new country that's foreign, meeting new immigrants, building relationships, I said that implicit detail may be, since their relationships helped them to feel not so alone, one can assume that they were able to build strong, friendly, and successful relationships that were beneficial. Why? It says it in the text that they were not able to feel so alone. It said that they came across other immigrants that understood them. Now, that particular implicit detail is not directly stated, but based off of all of the other things that occurred in the text, we can make an assumption that they were able to build good relationships and successful relationships. Because if they weren't, would they still be feeling alone? Yes,
No.
they would. They would. Let's think about it for a second. If you went from an old place that you're familiar with to a new place and you don't meet people, you would still feel some sense of loneliness. But because the text, they have each other, but as with anything, you want to branch out of just your familiar family and build. Because think about it, if your family doesn't have the skills that you need to survive, you got to meet new people. So I can love you and have you all I want, but if you don't know how to build a house, our love ain't gonna do nothing because we're gonna starve to death and we're gonna not have shelter and probably freeze to death if it's cold. Okay? So I was able to pull that detail out of the text, even though it wasn't directly stated, but I was able to draw a conclusion or make an assumption based off of the evidence that was given to me. Okay? All right. So let's look at this one together. Read that one for me, Edgar.
Making marijuana legal will help sick people. Some people use marijuana to feel better. Because marijuana is illegal, these people are not allowed to use it to manage the pain brought on by their illness. However, if
Marijuana.
were illegal, then doctors could prescribe it for the patients that really need it, and sick people could have another medicine to help them.
Okay, so based off of that text, what is the main idea? What do you think the main idea? Alicia, yes.
That if marijuana was legal, that it would be to help the people that need it.
Okay, very good. So if marijuana was a legal drug, it could be used for medicinal purposes. In other words, it could be used as a medicine to cure or help whatever sickness or disease are out there. Now, so we know that's the main idea. What are the directly stated facts in the text that support that marijuana could help in a medicinal way? Yulisa, yes.
Some people use marijuana and feel better.
Some people use marijuana to feel better. Fajay, yes.
If marijuana was legal, then doctors could prescribe.
Okay, if marijuana was legal, then doctors can prescribe it. So in each one of those cases, we now have directly stated evidence in the text to support the fact that our main idea is marijuana should be made legal so that it can help sick people because those specific facts are stated. Now, the implicit details. What assumptions or conclusions can we draw from the explicit details or from this passage that are not directly stated? Yes, Jeff?
That some doctors may want marijuana to be legalized.
Okay, some doctors may want to be legalized. And he was able to draw that because it says if marijuana were legal, then doctors could prescribe it. So right now, the word if states that marijuana may not be legal for prescription. Fajay, yes?
Well, I don't know if I'm right, but
Mm.
if they keep saying that if it was legal, it was legal, it would
Mm.
be good to offer, so that they must not be good for that.
Okay, so she may say that the reason that they made it illegal, which is a good point, I didn't think about that, is the fact that it's not good to be used for medicinal purposes. In other words, there may be other medicines out there that are better to use, okay? So, again, we stated that the main idea is making marijuana legal will help sick people. One of the explicit details that I used was, that we came up with, was some people use marijuana to feel better. And then for explicit detail, I came up with this one. I said sick people don't have a lot of medicine that deals with pain. So while the ideas that you guys came up with were great, I didn't even think about those. This is one that I thought about as well. Now, the reason I said sick people don't have a lot of medicine that deals with pain, because it specifically says, and sick people could have another medicine to help their pain. So the assumption that I made is that maybe there are not a lot of medicines out there that can help people who are in pain. So if marijuana was made legal, this would be one way by which they could actually receive the additional pain medicine. Okay? All right, so here is the final sample. And we're going to do a think, pair, share. So what I want you to do is take the time to read the passage. Look at what you think the main idea is, explicit detail, implicit detail. Share that with the person closest to you. We'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll share out what you think is the main idea, explicit detail, and implicit detail. All right, do that now, please. So you got to read the passage first, come up with your main idea, explicit detail, implicit detail, what you think it is, and then after you come up with your own ideas, then share them out with your neighbor or your partner, and then we'll share them out together as well.
So the main idea is to students are to take standardized tests.
That's it.
The main idea is it is not fake to students or to teachers.
Yeah, about 1 more minute.
You want the implicit details.
Yes, Fajr. 30 seconds. Malik, yes? Oh. 10 seconds. All right, let's take a look. Read the passage for me, Fajay, yes.
I think that students should be required to take standardized test exams. Students who do not do well on time tests will not do well on the time test exams. Therefore, the exams will inaccurately assess these students' academic ability.
Okay, so what do we think is the main idea of that text? Axel, what do you think?
I do not think that students should be required to take a standard.
Okay, so students should not be required to take tests, standardized tests. What is an explicit details directly stated in the text to support that aspect? Fajay, yes.
Is that students who do not do well on time tests will not do well on time tests.
Okay, so it says it right there, students who do not do well on time tests may not do well on time standard exam. All right, so what now can we pull as an implicit detail, an assumption or conclusion that we can draw? Jeff, yes.
That students may not be able to do well on time tests because they're pressured.
Of their pressure. Now, he was able to come up with it, not because it was stated directly in the text, but it says he was able to use the evidence. Students who do not do well on time tests may not do well on a time standardized test. And then if you're pressured, there will be an inaccuracy in being able to assess how well you are as a student academically. Alicia, yes.
And that like if like they can do it, like if they know it, but they don't finish it in time, we just gonna say that they got everything that's wrong.
That's also a good point, because if it's timed and you don't finish it within the time allotted, it could also affect the accuracy of the test, because it's not testing all of what you know because you didn't finish the test. Fajay, yes.
I think, I don't know what implicitly, because what I'll be doing when I do implicit, like the negative. And my implicit, what I will is that if we do that, if we don't have time testing, we can take.
Well, implicit can be both negative or positive. It's not necessarily locked into being positive or negative. Implicit just says what evidence can we pull from the text, positive or negative, that is not stated. So if you decided to pull something from it and it's on the negative end, it's okay. There is no set pattern that says that everything that you pull from a text has to be on the positive side, has to be on the negative side. It can go either way. Okay? All right. So for our grouping assignments, here are our tier grouping assignments now that we've gotten through the actual lesson. Group number one, the students will be given a series of passages in which they will have to identify the main idea of the passage and list the explicit and implicit details based off of the information in the passages. Group two, the students will complete a 3-2-1 method graphic organizer. In this graphic organizer, it will entail students writing 3 explicit facts from the passage, generate 2 implicit facts from the passages, and then generating 1 central idea from the passages. And then the last one, the last group, group number 3, the students will create their own story. They will have to write 7 to 10 sentences within their story. The story has to have explicit details, a main idea, and then the reader needs to be able to identify the implicit details. The passage will be given to another member of the group, and he or she has to identify those elements within the passage. So before we get to our tier groupings, let's go ahead and do our summary and our exit ticket, and then I'll disperse you to your actual groups, and then I will conclude for the day. So our summary, I have 5 questions here. Let's see if we can actually answer those questions. Edgar, read question number 1 for me.
What's the definition of the main?
Okay, so according to what we just talked about, according to the screen, according to your notes, what is the definition of a main idea? Axel, yes.
The main idea is the central point of the whole story.
Okay, the central point of the whole story, the big idea. Number 2, read that question for me, Jeff.
What are supporting details?
What are supporting details? Fajay, yes.
Examples of how that is the main idea.
Very good. Examples that support how it's the main idea. Read question number 3 for me, Fabricio.
What are the 2 types of supporting details?
Okay, what are the 2 types of supporting details? Ulysses, yes.
Explicit and implicit.
Implicit, that is correct. Number 4, read that question for me, Alicia.
Where can the main idea of a sentence be located?
Okay, what do we say, Fajay, can the main idea of a sentence be located? Anywhere. Mainly at the beginning, mostly at the beginning, most times, but anywhere. And then, what does the term inference mean? What do we say was an inference? Axel, yes.
A guess or a supportive guess.
Okay, so a supportive guess, like a conclusion of reading in between the lines based off of the information. All right, so let's look at our exit ticket. We're going to read the passage, and I just want you to simply be able to come up with the main idea of this passage based on what we discussed. Alicia, go ahead and read that for me, please.
Most importantly, school uniforms will save money. Parents will no longer have to spend a portion on school clothes. Instead, parents can buy just a few uniform pieces that a student can wear every day, rather than buying many different outfits, which will cost parents more money.
Very good. So what can we identify is the main idea of that text? Khadijah, yes. School uniforms will save money. For the sake of argument here, give me an explicit detail to show that. Alicia, yes.
That, like, the students can wear, they can wear, the parents buy a few pieces and the students wear it every day.
Okay, very good. So it directly states that in the text. And just for the sake of argument, Fajay, give me an implicit, give me a conclusion that we can draw that's not stated. Yes.
If we don't wear uniform, you will look like a bunch of babes.
Okay, so if you don't wear uniforms, then your style or your attire may not be at the best, okay? And again, you were able to extrapolate that from the fact that parents are able to wear a few pieces of uniform at a time, okay? All right, so now we're going to disperse you into your groups to complete the assignments, and then we'll go from there.